Hello and welcome to Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again. I've already got our next brick picked from the wall. As we unwrap this one though, I want to talk about building a mystery. Not the Sarah McLachlan song that helped her launch the Lilith tour back in the 90s, but the idea of mystery in stories and how today in this internet world full of wikis and character guides and critiques of, every second of every television show and movies, are we still open to having a mystery built and leaving it as a mystery? I feel like, especially in comics, we have this need for every plot thread to be definitively answered, and in relatively short order, too. If you think back to the long-running comics of the 80s, and even 90s, it was totally normal to have an open plot thread for more than an arc or two, but for years and years and years. Today, comic readers just expect things to be solved for them immediately. Like, if there's an open plot thread for, 5 issues, there's what is going to happen with the plot? And they, go crazy because they think the author has forgotten about it. And I think it's the same thing in movies. Of course, movies you just get in one big hunk. But, people are not into the persistence of mystery anymore. Now, maybe that is J.J. Abrams' fault and his ilk, right? Because you have TV shows that were predicated on mystery like Lost that never actually answered the mystery, but promised that they would. And I think that that's actually a big component of this idea of rejecting the idea of lasting mystery that extends and maybe doesn't ever get fully solved. Because we as consumers got burnt a number of times in the 2000s where creators said, there's a mystery, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to answer it, I'm going to solve it, and then they didn't. And after seeing a few times of that, we get to the point where we're like, look, this story needs to make internal, consistent sense with itself, and you've got to answer the mystery, and don't forget about it. And so I think that that's we've got PTSD as readers and watchers and consumers from that, where now it's just unacceptable to us for there to be a big mystery. And I want to just say to you now I've seen them. I'm going to say to you, embrace the mystery. It's okay. And it's okay if something's not internally consistent the entire time if you enjoyed the story. And I'm chief among the people that need to hear that message, because I am somebody who hates when things are not internally consistent and don't totally solve everything. But I need that advice as much as anybody else. These, in a way, are my favorite 2 books in my collection. I was so hyped when they came out because this is Uncanny XMen by Chris Claremont, Jim Lee, and also Mark Silvestri, volumes 1 and 2. I can't believe I put them in the same package, honestly. We might do them in 2 installments, because oh my gosh, do I have a lot to say about these books. And I've been waiting. Okay, so here we are with Uncanny XMen by Claremont and Lee, volume 1. This is the run that immediately follows Inferno. So we have a team who is once again known to be alive by some of their friends, who's, done this big fight. It's pretty much the same lineup that we had in Inferno, with the addition of Jubilee, who the team actually discovers in the first issue here, which is Uncanny XMen 244. The ladies all go out shopping, and as part of that shopping, they pick up Jubilee. So then there's another issue where the boys are out doing something, and the boys at that point is Wolverine, Havoc, Colossus, and Longshot. Actually, do you know, every time I've said this team lineup, every time this has come up with Fall of the Mutants and Inferno, whatever, I keep forgetting Longshot. It's not that I don't like him as a comic book character, but he's kind of technically not a mutant, kind of is, comes from an alternate, dimension, and he just kind of slips out of my memory, even though I'm a massive Dazzler fan, and he and Dazzler are, a long-term item. And then after 245 comes Atlantis Attacks, which is actually in its own omnibus, which I love, and which many people don't. And then something really big happens to the X-Men. They get into another massive battle, this time with the Sentinel Master Mold. Master Mold? Yeah. And the only way that they are able to get out is to go through the Siege Perilous. And the Siege Perilous is this portal which can save them, but will also transport them and change them. And the X-Men go through it, and dire things happen to them. So starting after 247, the X-Men are splintered, effectively, and are not a team. And they go on not being a team for 30 whole issues. Now that is not quite as long as it sounds. because the book was double shipping at this point. And so really, there were a lot of issues in a relatively short amount of time. We're only talking about like a year and some change rather than like 2.5 years. But for a period, at the point that it was at really like the height, or at least the growth of its popularity, we're talking about an X-Men book with no team. And in that period, we have Psylocke going into her Asian body and Wolverine kind of rescuing her. We have Polaris being possessed by Malice. We have Wolverine, actually I'm kind of skipping around a little. We have Wolverine in the Outback versus the Reavers. We have a substitute X-Men team on Muir Island consisting of like Forge and Strong Guy. We have Dazzler being hunted by a crazed fan. We have the introduction of Gambit as we rediscover Storm as this like preteen girl. And none of these issues have a team, and it culminates in finally figuring out what happened to Rogue. She's in the Savage Land dealing with the split of her personality between her Rogue personality and her Captain Marvel personality. So really, we only get the full X-Men team for like the first 5 issues of this omnibus. So how is X-Men so popular in this period? Well, not only was it X-Men, not only was it still Chris Claremont, not only was Mark Silvestri there, but early on in this run, we get Jim Lee joining this title. Now, Jim Lee had done a run on Alpha Flight. He had been on Punisher, but there's just some special alchemy when he gets to X-Men with Chris Claremont, and we start seeing this art. His art develops so quickly and becomes something so magnificent, and it's really just stunning. This is actually, I always think of this page because I had it as trading cards long before I had these issues. Because I came in just at the tail end of these issues. As I've said before, my first issue was X-Men 3 in 1991, which is in that next omnibus. And so even though I wanted to scoop up all this stuff, it had already hit speculation craze because it was all early Jim Lee art. And so it was really expensive. And I happened to get one of those like Sears and Roebuck catalog comic book kits that came with like a short box and like 100 random Marvel comics to put in the short box. And you know, 100, you had a pretty good chance of getting some good issues. And my 100 included Gambit's first 2 appearances, which are probably some of the most expensive single issues that I've got in my collection to this day. So I had those. I had the Rogue in Miss Marvel issue. I had the Captain America flashback issue, but I really didn't have anything from the 240s, 250s, or even the early part of the 260s. So this was all a part of X-Men that was like completely unavailable to me. And it was unavailable for years because this was not a well reprinted era. There were like a couple of like Jim Lee themed trades out there, but they were ancient and they were really hard to find. I've only ever had one reader on CK ever tell me that they found them. And they actually had to correct what I said was the contents because I didn't know, because I could never find them to prove the contents. So when they announced this omnibus, like, of course everybody's going to buy it. It's Chris Claremont, it's Jim Lee, it's what, you know, it's X-Men. Everybody wants it. But then people think just because it's Jim Lee X-Men that it's like this amazing bombastic team that's been assembled and it's going to remind you of the X-Men animated series cartoon because that's been based on Jim Lee's designs. And then I get this book and they're like, this is dumb. And you know what? It is a little bit dumb because there's no X-Men team in it. And so it's like this weird paradox, right? It's the X-Men run of Lee and Claremont, and yet it's not the X-Men. So part of it is people are just thinking of what's in this next book, which we'll talk about. But part of it is just that like Claremont's long game on the X-Men was he wanted to shatter the team really thoroughly. And this is consistent to what he had begun as early as Mutant Massacre. Like if you look at his run thematically, this was a period of 50 issues where he's systematically taking apart everything that makes the X-Men X-Men. He takes away Xavier. He takes away the school. He takes away Storm. He just, you know, breaks it down and breaks it down and breaks it down to the point that the X-Men is really just Wolverine. Colossus is off somewhere thinking he's just like a painter. You know, everybody's been scattered to the winds, and it's actually, you know, Wolverine in part who starts to put the team a little bit back together, even while all of these other threads are happening, and it culminates, of course, in the next volume with the Muir Island saga. So this actually comes right up against the Extinction Agenda, which we opened quite a few episodes ago at this point, and that is the book that directly follows it. So Extinction Agenda is like Claremont and Lee 1.5, because it fits exactly between this one and the next volume, and I'm going to talk about the next volume on another episode because I have a lot to say about this period. Now, of course, these books have gotten harder to find because they're some of the most in-demand X-Men material there is. So if you want this omnibus now, you're going to have a little bit of trouble finding it, and you might have to pay a little bit of a premium. And guess what? It's still not really covered in any other kind of collection. finally, they did do an epic collection that covers the latter half of the next omnibus, but this still is one of the most unreprinted periods of X-Men, even though we've got 2 omnibuses here, because the only other way to get it in full is in black and white Essentials collections, which are actually pretty cool, because how often do you really get to see Jim Lee black and white art other than DC's Unwrapped and Noir editions of his like biggest runs on things like Batman Hush. So, I treasure this, even though it's a weird period of X-Men, and it's not a period that I recommend. If you're going to go and get one omnibus, don't get this omnibus. But if you're doing a read from Mutant Massacre forward, you want this omnibus, or if you plan to have that on your bookshelf. But again, this is all available digitally from Marvel. It's on sale all the time on Comixology, and if you have Marvel Unlimited, you can read it all every month as much as you want. So if you have the choice between getting this omnibus for like $100 or $200, or just subscribing to Marvel Unlimited for more than a year, I would say sign up for Marvel Unlimited. The value is there. But if you're somebody who wants it on the shelf, look at me clinging to this book, then you should buy the omnibus. And I think, were there alternate covers? I think there might have been 2 covers for this. I forget what the other cover was. Oh, the other cover was like one of these really wide covers that was letterboxed, and those kind of just bugged me. I think that was the other cover. So I went with this one. So that is the story about X-Men Claremont and Lee Volume 1. I'm going to go to ceremonial shelving now and then be back for the next episode so we can talk about the next volume. Here we go. I'm going to put it down here. So thanks so much for tuning in to this very special episode of Crushing Comics, because it's my favorite omnibuses. Tune in next time to hear me talk about the second half. Thank you so much for watching.